Day 145, September. It's rained on and off for several days now. Massive thunderstorms and lightning. No Weather Underground, no Weather Channel, or anything else for that matter. It seems to be clearing up a little now. Why I'm keeping this damn journal, I don't know. It's not like anybody's gonna read it. Yet I have some strange compulsion to keep going with it. It's the only thing I have to keep my thoughts straight. I have plenty of meds for my mental dysfunctions, but I've not taken them for several days. Think I'll hop on the four-wheeler and take a ride down to the road. Maybe things aren't so bad. Maybe everything's gone back to normal. Day 146, September. Yesterday I went off the property for the first time in what seems like months. The road was clear for a long way, then the vehicles came into sight. I was heading for the small town that I've been going to since buying the property. Scared to death to see what became of it, but I just had to see it for myself. Some cars were empty, some were not. Some were still running. The pungent smell of rotting corpses filled the cold air. Vultures were feeding on the ample bounty. At least those birds are still alive. I found it ironic that the bird virus did not kill the birds. The number of cars with the dead entered into the hundreds, maybe even the thousands. To be sitting in their vehicles interred forever in what they used to treasure. Men, women, children, most with looks of pain and terror on their frozen faces. Boils, sores, and skin cracked open all over their lifeless bodies. I tried not to look, but my eyes kept being drawn to them. As I approached the center of the town, there were thousands around the high school and CDC tents. Why was CDC tents in such a small town? I guess that they could not save the bigger cities and move to the smaller ones. On the football field, there were bodies stacked like cordwood and government incinerators to dispose of them. Hundreds of people, maybe more. This is a nightmare. I didn't need to see this, but it's a fact of life now. I know I'll have bad dreams for the rest of my life. Many of these bodies have been there for a while, showing signs of advanced decomposition, while others are not as far along. So many people, and not one of them moving. The ride back was long. There were no houses outside of town to be seen, but a few roads leading off into the woods, similar to mine. I'll have to investigate another day, as it was getting late, and I really did not want to be out after dark. It was so creepy. Every so often I would stop, turn off the engine, and listen for anything that may indicate someone was still alive. Nothing. I cranked back up and ride for a while again. Doing that took longer, but I felt I just had to do it. When I got back, I keyed up the shortwave and broadcast a message. Much to my surprise, Jenny in Nebraska answered. I almost cried to hear another human voice, even one I didn't know. I think she did too. We talked for what seemed to be hours, each of us relaying our situation and events. She and one of her children had survived. Her husband and the older child did not. She had buried them across the street in their subdivision playground. Her husband was a semi-prepper, so she had some provision to last several weeks. She said it was strange that people died so fast that the run on supermarkets had been rather limited. Many stores still had at least some stock on their shelves. She and her son had gone out a few times, but didn't hear or see anyone else. She, like me, did not know why they survived while nobody else did. She and the youngest son stayed in the basement, while the husband and the older son went out to keep things up topside. She guessed it was the isolation that saved them. She explained she was going to her father's cabin the next day because that had always been the rally point discussed in the disaster plans. She felt everything was quiet enough now to travel. I told her to pack up as much as she could and be careful on the ride out. Many of the streets had cars on them, and don't be afraid to push them out of the way. She said she'd have to drive through a few backyards, parks, and road shoulders, but she felt she could make it. Then came a point where neither one of us knew what else to say. There was a long pause. She told me to be careful and to take care. I wished her the same. And that was it. So others are still alive. That's a good thing, I guess, as long as they're not crazy or violent. I wondered how many people are still alive that are actually crazy and dangerous. I figured I would probably never hear from her again. I took a few pills and a couple of shots of Crown Royal and went to bed. Day 175, November. It's been a while since I've written in this journal. I guess about a month or a little more. Truthfully, I just forgot about it. Not really much to say, I suppose. Not even sure of the date since my laptop battery died. No need for a computer that will never connect to anything again. I've been venturing out further and further into the surrounding areas. Gone down many of the side roads and streets in the town. It's the same everywhere. Nothing. Empty houses or houses with corpses scattered around. The smell has dissipated for the most part, but I still get a whiff of it now and again. I've made contact with several other people who had formed groups to begin the salvage of the nation. Many are a menagerie of people who, for some reason, just started traveling. Many made contact through the CB radios, a few through shortwave radios. Some reported that there were marauders around who had reduced their numbers. There are plenty of resources if you know how to get to them and know what you're looking for to retrieve them. I figured the marauders were actually infected and suffered from the insanity the virus can cause. If that's true, they won't last long. I hate to wish bad things upon anyone, but I sure wish the bad guys would just go ahead and pass away so the non-infected people can have a chance. I know it's not their fault, but they're as good as dead already. No one can help them. I feel horrible for thinking like that. I started running low on fuel, so I went by an automotive store and got an electric fuel pump from the shelf, a battery, fuel line tubing, and pumped fuel from cars and gas stations. It was only a matter of time before the fuel would be too old to use, even with additives. I read where diesel seems to last the longest, but I don't have anything diesel. I've given the location of town to a group of people I raised on the CB base station. I did not give them the property's location, though. They claimed to be heading this way. They said there were 33 of them from different locations within 200 miles or so. Many just wanted to get away from the bigger cities to start over again. We'll see if they show up. I've started clearing the town's main roads with a large city front loader that was left behind. I've started clearing the town's main road with a large city front loader, depositing the cars and the bodies in a large pit I dug in a field just outside of town. It wasn't big enough. That's going to take forever, but if the town is to come alive again, it needs to be done. I told them I've hooked up a civil defense siren to a generator, so all they had to do was crank the generator and plug in the cord so the siren will go off. I've tested it and it works. It's in the middle of town and I'll know if they show up. I told them to leave it on for a while, then shut it off, that I would hear it and will come. Day 185, November. The air is cold and brisk now, mostly at night. The fall leaves are on the ground with the dusting of frost on them in the mornings. I amused myself for a few moments by watching my breath in the air. I'm guessing there'll be no Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's this year. I don't think anyone has ever experienced that. Yet the sun rises in the mornings, just as it always has, with no concern as to what's happened. The planet doesn't seem to notice everyone is missing. I can't raise the group on the CB that's coming in anymore, so who knows what happened to them. It's been a couple of weeks, and they should have been here by now, or at least made contact again. Hopefully, they're the good guys, and not bad. The forming of a new community has been on my mind since talking with them. I have to wonder how that's going to work. I've been around enough in my life to know that there are always some self-righteous sons of bitches that think that they can just take over and start barking orders. So far, I've carried my weapons with me everywhere, but haven't really needed to use them. But some butthole telling me what to do is not going to set well, and the weapons may find a use after all. I can only hope that they're the right kind of people. I've been alone for so many months, and although I've not had in-person contact, I can't say as I've done badly for myself. I'm still alive after all. In many ways, I consider the town as mine, and if they show up, then it will belong to all of us. I'll get over it, I suppose. It no longer takes 40 minutes to get into town, since there's no speed limit and no cars blocking the way anymore. I can make it in about 15 minutes now. 35, down to 15, up to 25. Not anymore. It's 80 now. I kept my property's entrance as obscure as I can. I've kept my property's entrance as obscure as I can. I use different places to enter and exit, so no one place is obvious. I let the grass grow over the obvious places and keep the gate locked. In all reality, any group would eventually find me. It's a risk, but things need to start over again, and I need people to talk to and help if I can. I don't think people were meant to be all alone. Our minds just cannot handle that. Day 190, December 20th. I was sitting by the stove this afternoon, sharpening my knife, and the siren went off. The group had finally arrived. I was excited and freaked out all at the same time. It sure took them long enough. The road must have been much more difficult than they had anticipated. It was rather cold that day, and the truck took a few minutes to warm up. I approached the town with caution since I had not heard from them and didn't know what to expect. I did not find a group. There was only one woman, about her mid-40s, and a little girl, maybe 8 to 11 years old, just standing there. They were tattered and shivering. As I approached, they had a blank stare in their eyes. They didn't move much, just stared at me. I looked around but saw no other people. As I got closer, I saw they had bruises and cuts. They were dirty and had blood on their clothes. I made eye contact and could tell about all I needed to know. I told them they were safe now, that my name was James and I was not going to hurt them. They seemed to know who I was but didn't say a word. I didn't see a vehicle that they may have arrived in, so I guessed they were on foot. Hell of a way to travel. They had nothing on themselves, just backpacks. I gathered them into my truck where it had gotten really warm. Back at the property, I sat them both by the stove and put on some water for coffee and a Mountain House dinner. It was starting to get dark now, and the light from the LEDs showed sparkles in their hair. I got the coffee done and a hot chocolate for the child. I got the dinner ready, and they ate like they had not eaten for days or longer. After dinner, I showed the woman the shower and how to use it, told her to leave their clothes in the hamper and I would have something warm for them to wear afterwards. Actually, I had no idea what to get them at first. I had not anticipated people coming to the property, much less women and children. I scurried around and got a couple of big and tall fleece shirts and some bobby pins. I took the shirts back to the shower, and the woman had already bathed the child. The sparkles in their hair were not decorative as I thought. It was glass. I told her there was plenty of hot water and to take her time. I asked if there were any open wounds, but she didn't really answer. In fact, neither had said a word since arriving. I pointed to a medical kit, and she got the point. She just looked up at me and, with the first emotion she had shown, smiled ever so slightly. When she was done, they came back to the cabin. I had blown up a queen-size air mattress for the child and told her she could sleep in my bed while I slept on the floor. Instead, she elected to lay down with the little girl. They snuggled into the comforter and were asleep pretty quick. I couldn't help but to just sit there and look at them, wondering what they had been through. It could not have been good. Even though I didn't know them, I knew in my heart that I would protect them with my life if needed. I didn't know why I felt like that, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt needed. Day 191, December. I stayed up all night watching over the girls. The woman stirred and looked up at me a couple of times, saw that I was there, and smiled and went back to sleep. When they finally woke up, I made them a pancake breakfast with rehydrated sausages. The woman had some coffee and finally spoke. Her name was Mary Kitchens. The child was Peggy, but she didn't know her last name. Peggy was the child of a couple who was with the group heading toward the town. Mary pulled out a satellite GPS from her coat pocket with the town marked as the end point. The group was coming through a large city and was ambushed by marauders. Peggy's mother begged Mary to take the child and get away any way they could and gave them the GPS device. Out of 33 people, they were the only ones who survived. The child had witnessed her parents being gunned down as they defended the two trying to get away. Mary's husband was also murdered. Mary did not have any children of her own. The marauders showed no mercy and killed everyone, men, women, and children alike. I could not control my tears, and we all had a good cry. Peggy came over to me, thanked me for taking care of them, and gave me a hug. I told them they were welcome to stay in my house, and we will make the best life we could right there. I showed them around the camp, basically how everything worked, and that I would teach them everything they needed to know. I offered to clean out the adjoining shed so they could have their own space, but they were perfectly fine staying where I was. Peggy pointed out that there were no toys, and that situation had to be rectified. The girls had regained enough strength, so we hopped in the truck to get toys from the Toys R Us in town. We left with 2 truckfuls of toys, clothes, and I grabbed another 24 by 24 shed to house it all in. Okay, I liked the big giraffe. It took all day and into the night, but Peggy was happy again and pointed out that if it wasn't Christmas, it was close enough for her. I scrounged around a little and found my computer. I got it working and discovered that the date was actually December 22nd. Funny how kids have that little sixth sense about Christmas. It was certainly cold enough for it. Day 192, December 24th. We went back into town and got some decorations from store closets and storage rooms. We decorated a fake tree that we had found in one of the stores and had Christmas We called it the first Christmas. New Year's was not typical, as we had no fireworks. I made the best dinner I could with Mary's help, and we all resolved to make this the best year ever.